joining us now, the senior Congress leader Pramod Tiwari. I'm also joined by PKD Nambiar, Jawahar Sarkar of the Trinamool Congress, and Sanjay Jha also with us. Pramod Tiwari, how would you respond to what the Prime Minister has said? Would you say that this was an out-and-out political speech with the elections very much in mind? Because he did also refer to all sorts of other issues as well. So what do you think was the bigger message here?
मैं बड़ी सीधी सी बात कहना चाहता हूँ
जी।
प्राइम मिनिस्टर ने जो देश के सामने सबसे बड़ी समस्या है महंगाई, उसके बारे में जिक्र नहीं किया, बेरोजगारी के बारे में जिक्र नहीं किया, आर्थिक व्यवस्था जो पूरी तरह चरमरा रही, देश इतने शायद ही आर्थिक संकट से कभी गुजरा हो, उसका कोई जिक्र नहीं। कहानियां सुना रहे मेरी गाड़ी खराब हो गई, तो जिस राज्य में जाते हैं, जिस राज्य का चुनाव होता है, कहीं नानी, कहीं मामी, कहीं चाची, कोई न कोई रिश्ता ढूंढ लेते हैं और कहानियां सुना देते हैं। किसानों की बात जब वो करते हैं कि हम ठीक से नहीं समझा पाए, तो मैं जानना चाहता हूँ क्या भारत देश के प्रधानमंत्री को 13 महीने लग गए 700 जाने लेने के बाद उनके समझ में आया? तो मैं सिर्फ इन
प्रमोद जी, आपका लाइन गया है, वील ट्राई एंड फिर से जुड़ेंगे आपके साथ, पर आई जस्ट वांट टू गो अक्रॉस टू पीकेडी नाम्बियार. Mr. Nambiar, let's just look at a couple of, because there were so many points, it's difficult to actually pick out some of the key points. So let's look at Uttar Pradesh and the politics. He spoke on Lakhimpur Kheri. He says the state government gave its consent for whatever committee the Supreme Court wanted to form, for which for whichever judge the Supreme Court wanted for that probe. He spoke about law and order in the context of women in Uttar Pradesh. He said it's much safer now. Does this necessarily bear out? Because the law and order situation, and there are so many examples well beyond Lakhimpur Kheri, which suggest that in fact law and order is awful still in Uttar Pradesh.
See, Vishnu, there is no doubt that what Prime Minister was already all talking about was predominantly that what was the situation before and under the Akhilesh Yadav government and today. There is no doubt that the situation with regard to law and order has improved drastically in Uttar Pradesh, but it still lags behind many other states. That's the truth. So the idea, whatever in his interview he was clearly talking about the way it has improved. The woman today can walk in the evening, go around in the evening without the Gunda Raj, which was the Bimaru state, and the Gunda Raj, which was the symbol of Uttar Pradesh, has transformed to a great extent. Of course, there is always a scope for an improvement. It's a large state which
Sir, there are any number of rape cases which are being reported on a constant basis. There is any number of communal clashes which have been reported. So how does this bear up?
So, 35% is the as lowered in terms of number, the year-on-year basis. If you really look at the
35% reduction in what numbers, Mr. Nambiar?
National Crime Bureau data.
Right, in crime, right.
Yeah, the 35% is the reduction in the rape cases in Uttar Pradesh.
All right.
It's not my data.
Jawahar Sarkar joins us as well. Mr. Sarkar, would you like to respond to that? PKD Nambiar says there's been a 35% reduction in crimes. Of course, crimes in the National Bureau, Crimes Bureau comes under various categories. So we need to see what has gone down and what hasn't. But the point that he's mentioning is that UP is safer. How would you respond?
No, that's perfectly a complete lie, in the sense that you can compare the National Crime Bureau records on any account. There are a couple of points on which there is marginal improvement, but the whole world knows that UP is one of the most unsafe states in India. But more than this, Vishnu, what we need to understand, as this is an election speech, this is a sponsored election speech, and he comes up with something like this every time. We are only 4 days away from polls, so he targets the audience because of restrictions on physical audiences, and he goes in for saying whatever he feels like. I mean, it's a complete tapestry of lies, exaggerations. You ask me any point on which he said, and I can give you the proper reply. So last time he had this Modi Nama TV. This time he has come up with a user-friendly TV, a user-friendly news channel, which is now an advanced version of Doordarshan, that will ask him prompted questions for which he has ready replies, or maybe on the teleprompter. Oh, God knows.
There was no teleprompter over there, sir, and we can't say that these were prompted questions either until we know so.
These are all prompted questions. I am saying this with authority. I have run a TV channel, one of the biggest channels. So let's not talk about things that we don't know.
Okay.
You don't know.
Okay. Sanjay Jha.
So the point is, you have to take it, just 1 second. The point is that you have to take it in what it means. You get a pro-state channel, the biggest pro-state news agency, and put them up to ask you friendly questions the same way he has done with. If he talks about dialogue, he talks about being in constant dialogue. Has he held one press conference in 7 years? He has not. So we can go on, but the others are waiting. So please, I'll come back.
Nambiar, that's a valid point. What's wrong with a press conference where anybody can ask anything? You know, this was just a standard question followed by an answer format. There was hardly any rebuttal, when there is so much which could be rebutted over here.
No, you are a senior journalist and you know how an interview take place, and I think Smita Prakash did an extremely good job. She asked almost a lot of questions which many media people in the various channels were talking about. The Prime Minister never answered to such kind of a question, and it was a very candid interview. I don't know whether is there any, of course he has got his own inimitable style of communicating. He's a great communicator. So somebody who have got an issue with that, that's their problem. So tell me one question which he has not given a proper answer.
Okay, Sanjay Jha, how would you respond to that? The Prime Minister took on, okay, I see your point. Sanjay Jha, he did take on all questions. You may be dissatisfied with his answers, but he did take on all questions from migrants to Punjab to farmers to China to security to Uttar Pradesh law. You can disagree with his answers, but he did take on all the questions. Would you agree?
Well, it was all constructed.
Mr. Sarkar, 1 second, sir. Let Sanjay come in and then I'll come back to you in a bit.
Yeah, Vishnu, in Parliament, I think the Prime Minister actually indulged in the most egregious lies that I think no Prime Minister of the country should abuse in a sacrosanct Parliament. He made the same outrageous accusations in this TV interview. To my mind, there are two things, Vishnu, that I want to point out to you on your show. I think the Prime Minister actually, in my opinion, is indulging in the worst kind of politics when he accuses the Congress party of helping the migrants to embarrass the government. His government brought in the worst draconian lockdown without any emotional empathy for the informal workers who are 85% of the workforce, who are devastated. I live in Mumbai. I saw the migrants who were like jam-packed at the railway stations. And it is actually, one needs to congratulate the Congress party for volunteering to do what the government did not do, is to give them tickets and food to go home. And I think today the Prime Minister making that accusation is ridiculous. But the most important point, Vishnu, before you move on, I think the Prime Minister's legacy till date, and I don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 years, is the fact that India stands today a divided society. The future of Indian democracy and constitution is in peril, and that is not some elite liberal observation. I think we should all be worried as a country as to where Mr. Modi is taking this great nation of ours.
Pramod Tiwari, we have you back. Pramod ji, एक main point शायद इस speech में इनके जो ये जो interview था, इसमें ये था कि उन्होंने कहा, and I quote, I have seen in all states there is an inclination towards the BJP. We will win the elections with a full majority. उनको कहना था कि इसमें कोई दो राय नहीं है, बीजेपी इन चुनावों को जीतेंगे. इसमें आप क्या कहेंगे?
मैं इस पर तो आता हूं बाद में. उसके पहले मैं कहना चाहता हूं, शायद इस देश के इतिहास के ये पहले प्रधानमंत्री होंगे मोदी जी जिन्होंने कभी फुल फ्लेज प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस एड्रेस नहीं की हो. ये तो आप बुला लो, सवालात बन जाएं आपके, और उनके जवाब भी पहले से तैयार हों. तो देश का प्रधानमंत्री जिसके 8 वर्ष भारत जैसे महान देश के प्रधानमंत्री के रूप में हो, उसका सवाल और जवाब आप देख लें. इसलिए कि आज इस सरकार के पास जवाब देने के लिए कुछ नहीं. दूसरा, 5 स्टेट, मैं दावे के साथ कह सकता हूं कि उत्तर प्रदेश में भाजपा 100 सीट नहीं क्रॉस कर रही है. 100 पर सरकार बन जाती हो मणिपुर और गोवा की तरह तो मैं नहीं कह सकता. उत्तराखंड में यह कोशिश भी कर लें तो 2/3 बहुमत से कांग्रेस आ रही। पंजाब में भारतीय जनता पार्टी का संगठन नहीं था, वो इस समय निश्चित रूप से महाराजा की कृपा पे है, जो थोड़ी बहुत 4-6, 2-3-4 सीट मिल जाए, डबल डिजिट पे नहीं आएंगे। गोवा की जनता तैयार बैठी है। पिछली बार सिंगल लार्जेस्ट पार्टी कांग्रेस थी, उसको सरकार नहीं बनानी थी। आप जानते हैं वहाँ एजुकेशन है, लिटरेसी है, सब कुछ है, भूले नहीं वो लोग। तो वहां गोवा में भी भूली जाए। अब मणिपुर के बारे में मैं दावे से नहीं कह सकता, मैं विनम्रता पूर्वक कहना चाहता हूँ, मुझे बिल्कुल एग्जैक्ट आइडिया नहीं है।
ऑलराइट, ठीक है प्रमोद जी, मैं I've heard what you've had to say. PKD Rambiar, respond to that. How can the Prime Minister say so clearly that he's winning all states? I mean, it's one of those things that political leaders do before elections. We are winning. It's done. It's a done deal.
So what I liked in the greatly in this particular speech, of course, his detractors will definitely have their, Sanjay ji will say that it is the worst and his government was very bad. That's very normal in a democracy, and that's the way we should have people who supports and also go against. Before I give you an answer, I wanted to stand corrected my own statement. I said that the 66% drop in dacoit cases in UP, 45%, I said earlier it was 35% reduction in rape cases, and this is all none of my data, it is all the NCRP data. If it is applicable to Karnataka, it is also applicable to UP, and 19% drop in murder cases. Now, if you say that a 22 crore people population state like Uttar Pradesh, if this has been an achievement of a particular government, irrespective of Yogi or Akhilesh, whomsoever, let us at least बोलो यार कुछ तो देश के अंदर प्रगति हो रहा है, या the state is going in the right direction. So I think there are times you need to criticize. If you say there is an unemployment issue, okay, let's discuss on that fact, criticize the government. But there are places, if a government is doing good, also appreciate. That is called as a constructive opposition. Now coming to the interview, so I wanted to say that one is that somebody was talking about it is a channel of all the channels, if I recall in India, do take the premium subscription of them and use that content from them from morning to evening. So I think putting an allegation on a news agency or a news network for giving an interview of the Prime Minister is uncalled for. If you are a media person, and then I expect that is something the minimum you should offer to another media business.
Mr. Nambiar, the statistics that you are indicating of the crime rate having gone down, if you look at the absolute numbers, they're still absolutely horrific in Uttar Pradesh. If you look at the National Crime Records Bureau numbers, these are this was brought out in 2021. For 2020, the state recorded the most number of murder cases at 3,779 in India. They also had the highest number of kidnapping cases in 2020 at 12,913. Now you can argue that this is the most populous state, but this is hardly anything to write home about.
No, I think this is what we are all missing this particular problem. Why? I said that Uttar Pradesh even today is one of these states where maximum number of all criminal activities do take place as compared to many other advanced states like even Gujarat or.
But you are saying there's been an improvement.
But the only thing what I am saying is in the last 5 years, this is the amount of reduction which had happened over the if you compare with the previous government.
Okay, George Sarkar, would you like to take on? Would you like to respond to that point?
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Sarkar.
There is no point in taking on his statistics, which are government produced. There may be a marginal improvement of 1% here, a 2% fall there, but that does not tell us the whole story. I have worked in government. I know how crime statistics are built up, how crime statistics have been excluded in many places. So we will not get caught in that. But what was quite repulsive, see, Mr. Sanjay Jha is not in the Congress, I am not in the Congress, the other gentleman is. But what was most repulsive is that he just scooped out Mr. Vajpayee and himself and said that the rest of India goes through went through a terrible phase because of Congressy culture of corruption. Congressy culture. He blamed the rest of India. Luckily, he started taking Mr. Vajpayee into his fold. Otherwise, when he talked of 70 years of nonsense, 65 years of nonsense, 65 years of terrible performance, he was also including Mr. Vajpayee. Now, these type of macro statements, these type of sweeping statements, these type of statements that can't be substantiated, this type of election propaganda being sponsored on television 4 days before the elections is nothing but just a gimmick.
Okay.
He is lost in his own world. Vishnu, 1 minute. Vishnu, only 1 minute. I have seen him in Parliament for 2 days. Yesterday, he was a few feet away. He was swimming in his own ideas, in his own delusive world. He spoke for about 1 hour more than what he wanted to speak. So you must understand that he is under deep threat.
Okay,
And
let PKD
in
Nambiar
Bengal,
respond to that,
he
then
had
I'll
said
go across
we'll
to
get
Sanjay Jha.
220. He got...
Got it, Mr. Sarkar. I'm just trying to manage my time. Mr. Nambiar replied to
Yeah.
that. The Prime Minister Johar Sarkar says is delusional in his views in this interview and what he said in Parliament.
See, Mr. Sarkar can definitely have his own view, but the only thing what we need to understand, he's a great communicator, and if he is communicating very well, did we ever had a Prime Minister in this country such a communicative? Every day he is communicating with you. I think the youth of this country do understand. We wanted to have a Prime Minister who communicates. Now coming to the Congress, he was talking about the Congress culture. Look at it, is not about just Congress, what he is talking about. In Andhra Pradesh, the government is former, it may be a new version of a Congress government, YSR Congress. In Telangana, it is Telugu Desam Party. You know that the history of that particular party, Mr. KCR, comes from the Congress. In Maharashtra, NCP, it's a Congress culture. The TMC, which Mr. Sarkar is representing, it's another Congress culture. So what he was talking about, there is a Congress culture which stands for corruption, which stands for not progressive, which is basically always into the divisive politics. And he was talking about all of that one by one. He was giving examples one after another. So you were also talking about that the interviewer was not able to giving a rebuttal. Why he was not able to? Because it was so self-explanatory in its nature, that interview, whomsoever has heard, everything is crystal clear. So I think, of course, you in a democracy, even in his interview, he said that it's the right of opposition to go against the government, talk about it, but not to an extent.
No, but sir, you know, there are other points that he said which again don't make sense. He was actually asked by Smita Prakash in that interview that they're dynasts in the BJP as well, to which the Prime Minister said it doesn't compare. But again, if you just look at the list of people who are dynasts, so many of them, I mean, I've got a list over here, you know, they're all associated with political families. So how can he criticize the others when the BJP has also got dynasts in their fold?
I think
yes, Mr. Nambiar and then Sanjay.
I think Vishnu, if you really play back that interview once again, the way he has explained about the dynastic politics, it is not. It is if Vishnu and me if we are two brothers and we have the capability of going and contesting an election and winning, it is not dynastic politics. But if you really look at it, if your father,
that's a very fine line, sir.
Grandfather,
in the Lok Sabha, Anurag Thakur, Dushyant Singh, Poonam Mahajan, Pritam Munde, Parvesh Saab, Singh Verma, B.Y. Raghavendra. I'm looking at a 2021 article. This would have changed.
Is there anybody
right?
who's become
in the Rajya Sabha as well? There are so many names. Sanjay Jha, go ahead.
I think
Vishnu, I want to tell you on your show, and I'm going to swim against the tide. I think Mr. Narendra Modi as a Prime Minister is a very mediocre speaker, because let me tell you, you don't judge a public speaker or a communicator by flamboyance and oratory. You discuss by the integrity of the content, by the honesty of what you convey. Mr. Modi uses bluster and bluff absolutely, and he kind of has a luxurious supply of it. I'll give you an example. In the interview with Smita, he talks about the fact that governments are a continuity, and yet he says that after 2014, India's fortunes changed. Mr. Modi should know where India's stock markets were, where India's GDP was, and where have we come today is all actually a contribution of governments of the past.
Okay.
So that's a absolute lie. And the second point, very important, Vishnu, I think Mr. Modi has to now be publicly questioned by one and all. Why have you divided
All
this
right. Well,
country
that opportunity,
on the
Mr.
Muslim
Jha, has to
bigotry?
present itself for a press conference or a place where he can be cross-questioned as well. I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. We'll continue playing out highlights of what Mr. Modi had to say and keep analyzing. Need to take a short break. There's more coming up on NDTV.